Okay, so today guys, we're going to mark our test and I know obviously I would do this in class with you, but we can't be together, so let's do it virtually. So when you're marking, can you use a different coloured pen like a green or a pink or a red, not a blue or a black, which you hopefully wrote in, and not a pencil, so it needs to be a colour that's going to show up, all right? I'd also recommend having a highlighter available. Okay, so let's start with question 1, which is covering SC 1 to 6 from the summary notes, and it has 16 marks available. Okay, so the first question says, 1A, why do humans need to eat? So there are 3 reasons why we need to eat, or 3 main reasons. It doesn't matter what order you put these in. So the first one I'm going to put in is growth. So if you put growing, anything that means growth, I'll even allow getting bigger, but growth is the answer there. And then the second one I'm going to put is it provides the energy for moving. So you don't need to write the word moving, you can write movement or moves, anything that means moving, okay? So the key word there that you need in the answer is anything to do with moving. And then the last one is protection from disease. So again, you don't need to have used the exact wording. If you put anything that means to protect you from disease, like helps improve your immune system or keeps you from getting ill, anything that means protection from disease is allowed. Do not move on until you have finished marking question 1A. On to 1B. Humans must eat carbohydrates for energy. Name 3 other food groups that they must eat as part of a balanced diet. So I've highlighted the key information there that I need to make sure I include in my answer, just to make sure I'm doing the right thing. So I can choose any of the other food groups other than carbohydrate. I can't say carbohydrate. So I'm going to start with one of the main ones, protein. So if you wrote protein, it doesn't matter where in the list it was, give yourself a mark. The next one I'm going to do is lipid, which is also known as fat. So if you have either the word lipids or fat anywhere in this list, you can give yourself a mark. And then I am going to put vitamins. So if you have vitamins anywhere in your list. Now there are other answers that you could have put which are also obviously acceptable. So if you put minerals anywhere, you can have the mark. If you put fibre anywhere, you can have the mark. And I will even allow water. If you put that anywhere, you can have the mark, okay? So if you had any of these 6, you can have a mark for each. Please do not move on unless you have marked question 1B. Okay, on to 1C. Look at the data table and use the data to answer the questions. So that's a really important thing. They've told you to use this data. So, part I. Which type of milk contains the most fat? Okay, which type of milk? So we've got 4 types of milk and they've asked us about the fat. So I'm going to highlight here and that will make my job much easier. So if I'm looking for the most, the highest number, so I've got 0.3, 1.8, 3.7, 0.9. The highest number there is 3.7. So that is found in the whole milk. So my answer is whole milk. And then it's asked, how is fat used by the body? So I need to remember back to the different uses of foods. So fat is used as a store of energy. There is a second possible answer that you could have put, which is it is used as insulation. So your fat keeps you warm, doesn't it? So either of those two is accepted or acceptable as an answer. Okay, either one, and you get 1 mark. Okay, on to part II. Which would be the best milk for a baby cow? Okay, so they're asking about a baby. Now, why is that significant? So let's have a look at the data, and remember we need to use the data in our answer. Okay, so I just got a blank one here because I thought it would be easier if we could look at one that wasn't highlighted. So we've been asked which is the best milk for a baby cow. So obviously, so this is one where you have to do thinking. You're not going to have been told this answer, boys, okay? It's one where you have to think about the answer. Now, obviously, it's not going to be the coconut milk because that isn't produced by cows. So it's going to be one of these three produced by a cow. Now, if you think about it, this is how the milk is supposed to be. We skim the milk or semi-skim the milk, and the reason we do that is to get rid of the fat. So if you look, the numbers for the protein, carbohydrate and calcium, they're fairly similar. There's, you know, tiny little bit of difference here or there because maybe they've added a little bit of extra calcium when they've skimmed it or something like that. But actually the only place there's a big difference, if we look, is in the amount of fat. And that's because obviously humans, we don't want to, or often we're trying to watch our weight and we don't want to be putting weight on. Whereas a baby cow does want to be putting weight on. It wants to be growing, which is why it needs lots of protein, and it wants to be putting weight on, which is why it needs lots of fat. So the best milk for a baby cow is without doubt going to be the whole milk. So you get the answer if you put whole milk. And essentially, that is the natural form of milk for a baby cow. So a baby cow in reality would never have to drink skimmed or semi-skimmed milk. That's only for humans. Sorry, I've just realised that that's in the way. So the answer is whole milk, and then 1 mark for anything that says that it's the natural form. So anything that means that it's the natural form, it's the way it would come straight from the mother, it's how the milk should be, anything along those lines that's saying that's the natural form of milk. And then the 2nd mark, I would say you need to refer to the fat. Now, I don't think you need to give the number here if you put most. So it has the most fat for weight gain. So if you put, you could have put it has 3.7 grams of fat, or you could have put it has the most fat. You don't have to say weight gain, but you do need to mention fat. So let's say the key word we're looking for in this bullet point is fat. So if you've spoken about the fact it's got the most fat, that's your 2nd mark. So 1st mark for saying it's the most natural form, or anything that means that, and then the 2nd mark is for saying it's got the most fat in it, okay? And then the last part of this question, why would coconut milk not provide much readily available energy? So this again requires deduction, and application of your knowledge. So they're asking about energy. Well, energy comes from carbohydrate, and then they've asked about coconut milk. Well, oops, have I highlighted the right one? Yes, I have. Well, if we compare the carbohydrate in this to the other three, it's way lower. They've all got over 4 grams, nearly 5 grams of carbohydrate, whereas this has only got 1.9. So something along the lines of it has the least, or it only has 1.9 grams of carbohydrate. So you could also have put, as I said, it has the least if you didn't put the actual number. So the key word I'm looking for is carbohydrate, and you do need to have given some kind of either saying it's got the least, or it's got much less than the others, or it's only got 1.9 grams, something that's telling me that the carbohydrate levels are low, or it's got a very low amount of carbohydrate, something like that. But carbohydrate is the key word we're looking for to gain the mark here, okay? Do not move on until you have completed marking question 1C. Okay, on to part D for question 1. Describe the test for starch, including what you would expect to observe if the food contained starch. So it has got starch in it. And then I put a picture here to remind you of what we did. So describe the test for starch. So you've got to actually give me a method of how you do it. So first step, crush food sample in the pestle and mortar. So that is worth 1 mark. Now, the key thing is that you've said that you have to crush it, and you do have to have used the piece of equipment, the name of the piece of equipment. So if you put squash, that's fine. Anything that means crush, okay? Any word that means crush is accepted, but you do need these words. If you don't have these in here, no mark for the first step. Okay, second step, add some drops of iodine solution with a pipette. Okay, so in this one, the key word that I'm looking for is iodine solution. So if you've put add iodine solution, if you've got those words in yellow, and it, even if you didn't put it in the second bullet point, if you put it in the third bullet point or the first bullet point because you weren't writing in a very structured manner, I will still give you the mark. The mark you're looking for is for iodine solution, okay? But this is obviously the perfect second step. And then the third step is they've asked you to say what you would expect to observe. So if starch is present, the iodine will turn blue or black. So the mark is for saying either that it's turning blue or black. That's where your mark is. So your first mark is for saying crushing the food. Your second mark available is for saying iodine solution. Your third mark available is for saying that it turned blue black. Okay, so you don't have to have exact same wording as me, but you do need the keywords that I've highlighted in yellow. Do not move on until you have marked question 1D. Okay, part E. What type of paper should you use to do the test for fat? For fat, so do you use normal paper, tracing paper, or filter paper? So which paper do you use? Well, it should be filter paper. That's what you would use in a lab. Now, I know we spoke about trying out other papers at home, but I did tell you in the video of the experiment that filter paper is the correct paper to use in the lab. So that's the only one where you can get a mark, okay? Do not move on until you have marked question 1E. Okay, so what you need to do now is you need to start at the beginning of the question 1 and add up how many marks. So each time you got a mark, I like to circle it like that, and if you didn't get it, I like to put a cross through it like that. So go through and add up your total marks for question 1, and then on the front here, let's say you got 15, you would write 15 in there, okay? So you're going to go through and you're going to add up the marks and you're going to write in your number there. Do not move on until you have added up and recorded your marks for question 1. Okay, moving on to question 2, which is covering SC 7 to 9 in the summary notes and is worth 11 marks. Okay, starting with 2A, what 2 types of cell does blood contain? So it of course contains red, oh I forgot this pen doesn't work, it contains red blood cells and it of course contains white blood cells. Now obviously it doesn't matter which way round you wrote those, and you get a mark for each, and you do need the full name: red blood cells, white blood cells. You can't just put red and white. Okay, and then part II, what is the fluid part of the blood called? It is called the plasma. The plasma. Please do not move on until you have completed marking part 2A. Okay, on to part B of question 2, so 2B. Look at the diagram below and answer the questions. So we've got the lungs, the heart, the body, and then we've got these arrows representing the blood vessels. So it says, on the diagram, label the 2 arrows that show the arteries with an A. So we've got to do 2 labels that are the arteries. So if you remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart. So that's an artery there because it is carrying the blood away from the heart to the body. And then this one here is carrying blood away from the heart to the lungs. So that is an artery there too. On the diagram below, label the 2 arrows that show veins with a V. So we need a V for going back. So remember, veins carry blood away, arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood back to the heart. So this is going back to the heart. This is going back to the heart. So in order to get 1 mark here, you need the A on the top left and the bottom right. If you have only one of them correct, no mark. You don't get half a mark, it's no mark. Then in order to get this mark, you need the V up on the top here and the V down here, okay? So it should go AV, VA like that. And again, you need both the V's in the right place for the mark, okay? Both the V's in the correct place for the mark. Okay, explain the difference between veins and arteries. So I'm going to use bullet points because it's worth 2 marks and I want to make 2 points. Arteries carry oxygenated blood at high pressure away from the heart. Whereas, so I'm making a comparison, veins carry deoxygenated blood at low pressure back to the heart. Now, I have put, as I always try and do, the perfect answer, and I've got more information than you need, okay? So, your options essentially are, if you said that arteries are carrying oxygenated blood, that's 1 mark. If you said that arteries carry blood at high pressure, that could be a mark. If you said that they carry blood away from the heart, that could be a mark. So you can have either of those 3 options. 1, 2, 3. Either of those 3 things gets you 1 mark. Then, if you said veins carry deoxygenated blood, low pressure, back to the heart. So you get the mark if you said that it's deoxygenated. You can have the mark if you said it's at low pressure. You can have the mark, you can have the mark if you say it was going back to the heart. Okay, so those are the options of things that you can say about veins and arteries when you're comparing them. All right. Please do not move on unless you have completed the marking for questions B and C. Okay, D. Which 2 substances does the blood supply to the body? So what is the blood giving to the body? So it's giving oxygen, carried by the red blood cells, and glucose, which remember dissolves into the plasma. So oxygen is worth a mark, and then with glucose you could also put acceptable answers are food, I will accept, and nutrients, I will accept. That's the best answer. That's the second best answer. That's not a great answer, but I will accept it, okay? So that's the only option there, and obviously it doesn't matter which way round these 2 went, but that's the only option there for the gas, and then glucose is the best answer. That's also a good answer, and that is accepted, okay? And then next part of D, which process are they then used to make energy? So what process do you then use the glucose and oxygen for to make energy? And the name of that process is respiration. Respiration is the best answer. I will allow respire. I will not allow this word that lots of people keep putting, which is a made up, so respirate. I won't allow respirate. It's not a word that's in our syllabus. It's respiration or respire, okay? Not respirate. Please do not move on until you have completed marking question 2D. Okay, and if you were good at sort of reading ahead, you'd see the answer is actually here in part E. Which waste product of respiration does the blood take back to the lungs? And the answer is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. I will accept CO2 if you wrote it like that. I will not accept it if you wrote it like this or like this. Okay, that's not accepted. That's not accepted. That with the 2 down here, I will accept, although technically in a real test, it wouldn't be accepted. You have to write out carbon dioxide. Okay. Please do not move on until you have finished marking question 2E. Just the same as before, can you please add up all your marks for question 2 and fill them in to the front page just like you did with question 1. So you should have a mark out of 11 on the front, please. Okay, so we're going to move on to question 3, which is covering SC 10 and 11 in your summary notes and your lesson booklet. And it's going to be out of 10 marks for this one, 10 marks. Okay, so question 3. Look at the diagram below and answer the questions. A, which organ pumps blood around the body? So if you get this one wrong, it's quite worrying. So hopefully 100% of people will have written the heart. Please do not move on until you have marked question 3A. B. Add the missing labels onto the diagram above using the words from the box below. So you have to use these. Now remember, the confusing thing is that the right hand side is the left hand side and the left hand side is the right hand side, because we're looking at it as if we've opened up your heart inside of you. So the top 2 chambers of the heart are called the atriums, and then the bottom 2 are called the ventricles, which means that the left atrium is over on the right hand side. So left atrium, and then this would be the right atrium. And then this would be, of course, the left ventricle would go over here. And then the right ventricle would go over there. So you get a mark for each correct one. Okay, so a mark for each correct one. Now what I'm going to do is, if you put your left and right round the wrong way, I think that's a really easy mistake to make. So I will give you half a mark for each if you put the atrium at the top and the ventricle at the bottom. So if you've got left and right the wrong way round, but you've put the atrium and the ventricles the right way round, then you can have half a mark for each. So essentially you'd get 2 marks out of 4 if you got your left and right round the wrong way. If you got everything right, you'd get 4. If you got 3 of them right, you'd get 3, and so on. But yeah, I'm going to be generous and allow you to get away with getting the left and right the wrong way around. Okay, so potentially 4 marks there. Please do not move on until you have marked part B. Okay, so now we're on to a quite unusual question, because it's worth quite a lot of marks for a science question and you have to do a lot more writing than normal. So this is question 3C. Using ideas about oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, explain the importance of the role of the heart. So why is the heart important, or what is what you're being asked? And you've been specifically asked to talk about oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, okay? So I would always start by putting my bullet points in. And I know I need to make 5 separate points, so I've got 5 bullet points there. I would usually then think about what words I want to use. So I've got oxygen and I've got oxygenated, deoxygenated. I'm going to add in that I want to use the word oxygen. I want to use the word nutrients or glucose. I want to use the word respiration. I want to use the word pump. And I've already got the word blood. I want to use that as well. That's in my question too. So now I feel a bit more ready. So I'm going to start by obviously talking about the main job of the heart. So the heart pumps blood around the body. So I've used up 1, 2 of my keywords in that first point. Now you might not have written the same thing, so watch to the end and then you can work out where you get your marks, okay? So I'm going to highlight where I've used keywords. All right. Oh, sorry, just dropped my highlighter on Doug's head because he's sitting on my lap while I do these answers. Just checking I'm getting everything right, aren't you, Doug? Okay, so the heart pumps blood around the body. It pumps oxygen or oxygenated. You could say oxygen rich. I'm going to say oxygenated. Oxygenated, nutrient rich blood to the body cells. So I've actually got a lot of marks in there because that's a keyword, that's a keyword, those are keywords. Now, what do our body cells then do with this oxygen and nutrients? The cells can then respire and produce energy. So I'm even using words that I haven't listed here. So here's another keyword. So I know I didn't say respiration, but respire means the same thing. So I can cross out that one I've used. Oh, and I've used that one. And I've used that one. Okay. So they can then respire and produce energy. So the heart then pumps deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. So I've used another one of my keywords. I think that's a good keyword there. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that the carbon dioxide in our deoxygenated blood can be breathed out. That's perhaps one that's not quite so necessary, but it's a nice bit of extra detail. All right, and I'm actually going to do a 6th bullet point because I've got space and I think it's a really good idea to just round everything up. So I'm going to put without the heart pumping, respiration couldn't happen. I'm going to put, and so cells would die. Because, of course, as we know, your cells will start to die if they can't respire. So I've got respiration again. Die is actually a keyword there. And pumping again that I've got. Right, so let's think about where you're looking for your marks. I don't expect you to have written this answer, okay? But what I'm looking for is, have you included 5 keywords, so 1 keyword per bullet point, so because it's worth 5 marks, I'm looking for 5 keywords, and I've highlighted in here all of the keywords that I've put. So what I'm going to recommend is that you pause on here, compare each sentence to one of your sentences, and if you've got a sentence that is similar, you can give it the marks as long as it's got the highlighted keyword in it. That's what I'm looking for, the highlighted keywords. If you read through one of your sentences and it doesn't contain a keyword, or it has wrong information in it, or it's just a fluffy sentence like we've talked about before, don't give yourself the mark for that sentence. But just because you lost it for one of your sentences doesn't mean that you can't get a mark for another sentence. So be really critical, read through each sentence carefully and slowly, think about whether it contains any of these keywords. If it doesn't, don't give yourself the mark. If it does and the sentence makes sense as well, it can't just have the keyword, it has to make sense and be used in the right way, then you give yourself the mark. Now I know this is difficult to do, I know it would be better if I could read it all through for you, but this is a really good skill to learn, to be able to assess your answer like this, okay, boys? And you learn an incredible amount from looking at what you did wrong and what you can do better. So it's a really good learning curve. So pause on this picture, or pause on this video, compare it to yours, give yourself a mark out of 5. Do not move on unless you have marked question 3C. Add up your marks for question 3 and write them on the front of your paper. So it should be a mark out of 10 for question 3. Okay, so moving on to question 4, which is covering SC 15 and 18, and there are 13 marks for this question. Okay, so question 4. George and Paul decide to have a race and measure their pulse rate before and after the race. Oh, that should say race there, not rate. Look at their result in the table below and answer the questions. So they've got their resting pulse rate, which you did at home, and then their post-exercise pulse rate. So before and after they exercised. And you did this at home and you made me those fantastic videos that I really liked watching. Okay, so let's have a look at question A. Explain how you should measure your pulse rate. So this should be explaining the actual method of measuring your pulse rate. So again, I'm going to go in with my bullet points. I'm going to put place 2 fingers on your wrist or neck. Now, I don't mind whether you wrote wrist or whether you wrote neck, but those are your 2 keywords, okay, for your first point. Either or, that's your keyword that you're looking for to give yourself the mark. Your next mark is count the beats or pulses, either word is fine, for 1 minute. Now, this is actually, that's a 1 by the way, this is actually the key thing that you get a mark for. You have to have said that you do it for a minute, because remember, BPM stands for beats per minute. If you said count it for 30 seconds and times by 2, that's absolutely fine. If you said count it for 15 seconds and times it by 4, that's absolutely fine as well, as long as you're giving the fact that you need to count it for a specific amount of time. I would then maybe put this will give you your beats per minute, but you don't need this last point. I was always a geek at school, so I used to like to make sure that I was going to get all of my marks. But your marks are for saying that you're measuring it at the wrist or the neck, and your other mark is for saying that you count it for 1 minute or 15 seconds and times it by 4, 30 seconds times it by 2. Okay, so those are where your marks are for A. So please don't move on unless you have completed marking for A. Okay, let's go on to B then. One of the boys played sports every day and leads a very active lifestyle. The other plays no sports and spends his free time playing video games. It's a bit like me at the time, this time, guys, because I've got obsessed with playing Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch. Can't stop playing it. Anyway, which boy has the active lifestyle? So this is one where you're not going to have learnt this, but you have to work it out from what you see. So if we look at George, he's got a resting pulse rate of 60 and it goes up to 75 when he exercises. Paul, however, has a resting heart rate of much higher, 20 beats higher, and his goes up to really high when he exercises. So what that tells you is, or suggests, is that this dude is much more unhealthy than this dude, right? So which boy has the active lifestyle? It is George, because George, and you work it out, you deduce that from the fact that his pulse rate is much lower than the other guy's pulse rate, okay? So George has the much more active lifestyle based on the table here. Let's go on to II. Use the evidence from the table to explain your answer. So that's what we were just talking about there. So George has a much lower resting and post-exercise pulse than Paul. I have to cram that in a bit there. So I would give you so you need to have said it that it's much lower. You could have even used the numbers. You could have said his was only 60 compared with Paul's being 80. And then you don't have to have put both. You could have put either here. If you put both, then they're worth a mark each. So 1 mark for saying that he's got a lower resting pulse rate, and 1 mark for saying that he's got a lower post-exercise pulse rate. But now we need to explain, well, why does that mean that he's healthier? So George has a much lower resting and post-exercise pulse rate than Paul, suggesting he is more active than Paul is. Just reiterating what they've said, that he's more active. That's your 3rd mark, saying that, that's your 3rd mark really there, saying that he's more active. Now, could you have consolidated it further by saying something like, exercise lowers your pulse rate? Over time. So obviously it doesn't at the time that you're exercising, but if you're someone who exercises regularly, you're gradually going to give yourself a lower pulse rate than someone lazy who doesn't. So exercise lowers your pulse rate over time. It doesn't mean that it does it while you're exercising. It means that it builds your health up, builds up the strength of your heart, the efficiency of your heart, the stamina of your heart. So that would be worth a mark as well. So where are your marks? Well, they're for saying that George is more active than Paul because he's got a lower resting pulse rate, he's got a lower post-exercise pulse rate, and then you may have given extra details talking about the fact that exercise over time is going to give you a better pulse rate than someone who doesn't exercise. Any of those things are good, valid points to put, okay? And 1 mark for each of them. So you can see it might not always be 1 mark per bullet point. I've got 2 marks in this bullet point, okay? Please don't move on until you have marked question 4B. Okay, so question 4C. After exercising, both boys found that their pulse rate and breathing rate had increased, which is what you guys found when you did it. Explain why the body needs to increase both of those during exercise. So basically you've been asked, why do they increase? So let's start by talking about pulse rate. If you started by talking about breathing rate, that's fine, but I'm going to start with pulse rate. So actually, no, I might talk about breathing first. I'm going to talk about breathing first. So your breathing rate increases because you need more oxygen, and also because you need to get rid, Dougie, don't whinge, to get rid of carbon dioxide. Okay, So once again, wait till I've finished, because you don't need to have written the same thing as me, and there are also other alternative things that you might have written that will get you marks. So that's my start. Now I'm going to move on. I've spoken about breathing rate, and I've said that one reason is because you need oxygen and the other is to get rid of carbon dioxide. Okay, so then let's move on. Now that we've spoken about breathing rate, we're going to talk about pulse rate. So your breathing rate increases because you need more oxygen, and your pulse rate increases so you can pump oxygen and nutrients to your body cells, or just to your body would be fine. So your pulse rate increases so you can pump oxygen and nutrients, you only need to mention one of them, to your body. Now I'm going to try and bring both of these together. This is because exercising uses energy which requires more respiring in muscle cells. Okay, so keywords: energy, respiring, and muscle cells. Right, again, I'm not expecting you to have put exactly what I've put, and I've also definitely got more than 4 marks worth of answers here. I'm going to put another additional bullet point on, which is alternative information that you might have put. Another way of saying it is you might have put muscle cells use up more energy, so need to respire more or quicker, or something like that. So what's important is you definitely want to have at least one of your marks coming from talking about breathing rate, and oxygen is the kind of the absolute key thing. So I would say you definitely want one of your marks to be coming from saying that you're getting more oxygen by increasing your breathing rate. You definitely want one of your marks to come from saying that your pulse rate increases so that you can pump the oxygen. So that would be another mark. Pump the oxygen and nutrients, that would be another mark around your body. So there's my 3 main marks so far. And then my 4th mark, ideally you want it to come from having talked about respiration. That would be the ideal. However, it could come from talking about muscle cells, it could come from talking about energy, and at a push, it could come from talking about getting rid of carbon dioxide. That's probably the worst element that you could include, but it's still worth a mark. But let's say oxygen is the absolute key. Pumping the oxygen and nutrients around the body is the second key, and using them for respiration is the third key, right? So those are where your 1, 2, 3, 4 marks should come from ideally. But as I say, you don't have to have needed to write the same sentence as me. I'm not expecting the same sentences. I'm expecting the same key words that we're seeing in yellow here. So again, I'll take a photo and insert that so you can pause, compare each of your sentences really carefully to each of my sentences, and only give yourself a mark where you've used a key word and explained it properly. Make sure your sentences make sense. Do not move on unless you have finished marking question 4C. Okay, Okay, moving on to 4D. Look at the diagram below and answer the questions. So, what is the name of the structure that has been magnified on the diagram? So this structure here, and the name is alveoli. I will allow air sacs, but it's not the right answer really. Alveoli is the correct answer. Okay, and II, what process happens in this structure? So the proper answer is gas exchange. So it's where oxygen is diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. But I will allow diffusion and I will allow absorption of oxygen. So, although they're technically not the right answer, diffusion, it is what's going on, and absorption of oxygen is what's going on, but gas exchange is the best answer. So those are question D answers. Please don't move on until you've marked question 4D thoroughly. Okay, and then the last part of question 4 is question 4E. Describe one way in which the lungs are adapted to their function. So, the most obvious one that I would have said is that they have a large surface area which makes them good at absorbing oxygen, because of course absorbing oxygen is their function, or gas exchange is their function. So large surface area is worth a mark, but there are other answers that you could have put. You could have put moist, that makes them good. You could have put lots of alveoli, that would be acceptable. You could put that they have got lots of blood vessels. Doug, have you just stolen the lid to my highlighter? He's so naughty. Doug, don't make me fight you. Doug, give that back. Dougie. So naughty, won't give it back. Right, moist, lots of alveoli, lots of blood vessels. There's a proper way of saying that, which is highly vascularized. Gross. Thanks for giving that back, Doug. Covered in spit. And I think those are probably all of the answers that we would go for. That's the best answer, but all the rest are fine too. Please don't move on until you've marked question 4E. Please add up all of your marks for question 4, it's out of 13, and write that on the front of the test. So you should have a mark out of 13 on the front. Hi guys, so I know we've only got halfway through the test, but it should have taken you most of the lesson by now to get through that. So what we'll do is we'll mark the second half of the test in your next hour-long lesson, okay? So although you've only marked half your test, we're going to stop now and you'll mark the rest next lesson. And Doug says that he's very proud of how well you're all doing so far, because he reckons that everyone's going to be getting great marks. Don't you, Doug? Okay, so I'll see you next lesson, boys, and we'll go through the next half of the test.